Hi there. This is a short story I wrote in March 2002. It begins with a poem from William Blake. I went to the garden of love and saw what I never had seen. A chapel was built in the midst where I used to play on the green. And the gates of this chapel were shut, and thou shalt not writ over the door. So I turned to the garden of love that so many sweet flowers bore. And I saw it was filled with graves and tombstones where flowers should be. And priests in black gowns were walking their rounds and binding with briars my joys and desires. William Blake. In my mother's garden, the plagiarism of the heart. When I was a little girl, about 10 or 11, I helped my mother tidy the garden so that it would look like something when my father came home from Africa. He worked abroad and we only got to see him now and then, mainly in the summer and occasionally at Christmas. We didn't live together as a family. At other times the situation was reversed. My mother and young sisters would travel to Africa and the older ones would travel on later when the school holidays had begun. This summer, however, he was due home and preparations were being made for his return. The garden was large and overgrown, stretching backward in an allotment shape from a rather ordinary-looking semi-detached house. It was a playground for the children of the street, and it looked that way. No flowers grew there. The ground was lumpy and hard, covered in clumps of grass and weeds. The upkeep was too much for my mother, and as I was only a young girl myself, it was too much for me. She managed alone, bringing up 5 daughters, and often there was no money. That summer we did what we could with the garden, though the results were meagre. The house hadn't long been built. It had been a farmer's field. The grass was tough, and the soil wet from the water draining off a nearby mountain, making the black soil heavy and difficult to work. We dug and dug in rows, her with the fork and me with the spade. I would jump up on the spade each time with childlike enthusiasm. We dug as if we were planting a vegetable garden. The soil was rich and smelt good. At last my father came home. He looked at the garden approvingly, and my younger sister, Madhu, who had not done the garden, ran towards him, saying, "Daddy, I've done the garden." She was about 7 or 8 at the time, and my mother and I, tired of hard work, just stood watching in the background, amazed at what she said. We watched the mutual pleasure emanating from their eyes. I was always very close to my mum, and years later, in our intimate moments, we would often come back to that story of the garden, which contained a significance we never quite realised. She would look at me, and we would smile together, locked in conspiracy. She would say, "Don't worry, you have a different brain to the other girls." We valued truth over lies, relationship over image. We were always doing our best, being sensitive and serving others, full of compassion and womanly virtues. This was the flattering image we cultivated of ourselves as consolation for the loss of that male approval. As I grew up, the pattern continued. Madhu always had the knack of appropriating what was mine and making it her own. She always craved to be first, and she always was first. People would often say to me, "Oh, you're jealous. Oh, it's just sibling rivalry." And I would laugh with embarrassment, as if it was an unimportant childish thing, forgetting Cain and Abel, the first death and the first murder. I can see them smiling together now, and I'm wondering what would have happened if I'd spoken, if I had moved forward and opened my mouth. How different my life might have been, what a different road I might have travelled. I would have moved from voyeur to participant in life and not led my life in the shadows. And what would I have said? I did it, Daddy. It wasn't Madhu. It was Mummy and me that dug the garden. And he would have stepped back and pulled on his large lips, opened slightly, his top lip tense and pulled tight in a grimace smile, covering his teeth. His eyes would have lost their sparkle, and he would have grunted something inaudible. There would have been no smile for me and nothing for Mum, for the lines were already drawn, and there was no point because there was no love. And I knew it, and so did Mum. This smile was a conditional love. Madhu's lie amused him, pleased him for some reason. To maintain our own empty image, we accepted that false transaction, a lie covering a lie. We were frightened, and we stayed frightened, women laughing amongst ourselves, disdaining men and the women who hang on them, for appropriating our work and our ideas, and not having any ideas of their own. My mother and I kept and nurtured our own conspiracy. We had done the real work. We were the real people. Our moral authority, our moral superiority was unquestionable, and we relished our own false, unnegotiable position. We were not slaves, we were masters. And while my younger sister gained an identity of success, we gained our own exclusive position. What we never say was that we wanted something too. Admitting that would have been a declaration of war on ourselves and on the image of the father and on the image of the family. I want to say that my sister stole my heart and sold it to my father, that she claimed a false identity, but it doesn't quite work. What's all the fuss about? Daddy didn't care anyway. I feel like I've always been plagiarized, and I know on some level it was not her fault but my own. I was responsible, and so was my mother. When I look up in the dictionary and find that it comes from plagiarius, meaning kidnapper, the stealing of a child, the stealing of a person, it seems to fit well. It's not my heart, but only my reputation that was stolen. But when love is conditional, reputation is everything, and I lost heart. Now I want to redeem, reclaim, unsteal my heart. I want to award myself my own smile. But there's a dilemma. To get what I want, I can either please Daddy or become Daddy. Yet both of these images I don't like. I would rather repress them. I need to lie down, to submit to his lying love, or stand up, stand alone, and face his lack of love with my own vulnerability and greatness. I need to smile at myself and claim these attributes as my own. I'm still scared. I can hear the critic saying, "You should be nice to your sister. It's all the men's fault anyway." I want to cling to my image of being good. If I claim to be the one who smiles, who entertains, I feel that I've let myself down. At the same time, I recoil from being the father I hated, the father I wouldn't support. I know that he didn't believe Madhu either. How could she have dug the garden? She was too small. But he goes along for the ride. It's safer that way. It suits him because he cannot tolerate any honesty about the nature of his affections. As long as the lies are unquestioned, everything will be all right, comfortable. In the Caribbean, there's a bird called the booby bird. It is beautiful and strong. It flies out to the deep waters to dive for fish in the bright blue sea. Sometimes it dives deep, and sometimes it jumps high to catch fish in mid-flight. And when it returns to land, it is assailed by the frigate bird, who does everything in its power to stop it taking its food to the nest. When I look at the world, I see a lot of fathers' daughters, a lot of frigate birds, but I am my mother's daughter, a booby bird. I still fly out to sea. I'm still digging in the rich soil and the blackness, still digging in the garden of love.